My interest in Devils Dyke was sparked by its popularity as a day's trip destination from Brighton, and also by the railways and amusements that were built there. I began to collect postcards and ephemera of the Dyke and research its history, and eventually decided that I'd like to write a book, focusing on the visitor attractions that it once had. However, I needed to look at the Dyke's history from a different angle, as had been previous publications that had already focused on its transport-related features. What these books lacked, however, was information on the people that managed the Dyke Estate and its attractions, particularly in regard to James Henry Hubbard, who was at the helm when the aerial cableway, the steep grade railway, and the amusements were installed. For a man who had so transformed the Dyke, it's surprising that so little seemed to be known about him, and that no one had previously tried to rectify that. So I decided I would endeavour to find out more about James Hubbard. I apologise for the poor quality of the picture, but this is James Hubbard. All I knew about James was that he was a Canadian, and he'd been at the Dyke from the early 1890s to about 1907, although the later date actually proved to be incorrect. With the assistance of a friend who had researched family history, I managed to find information on James and his family on the Ancestry, MyHeritage, and 3BMD sites on the internet. I also looked through newspapers held by the Keep, as well as giving me some personal information on James, had articles on what was happening at the Devils Dyke during his time there. The discovery that he was a mixed-race man, son of freed American slaves, was quite startling, particularly as mixed-race black men businessmen in the UK during the 19th century were very rare. It also connected with me on a personal level, as my youngest son is mixed heritage. So here is a little of what I discovered about James and his time at the Dyke. So the Devil's Dyke Gorge, of course, is famous for being the longest, deepest and widest dry valley in Britain. But I won't repeat here the often told story of how it was formed or whether the devil had a hand in it. Yeah. The Dyke's relative closeness to the developing Regency resort of Brighthelmstone, or Brighton as we know it now, led to it becoming a favoured day trip destination for visitors to Brighton who came not only to view the gorge, but also the stunning views from the escarpment all across the Weald. 5 different counties could be seen. In 1817, a refreshment hut was opened, which blossomed into a hotel and inn in 1831. This was held by William Thacker for 50 years between 1835 and 1885. Transport to the Dyke was made easier with the opening of the Brighton and Dyke Railway in 1887. This is the station, Dyke Station, which is where the Dyke Farm is now. So that was open from 1887 to 1938. In 1891, the Dyke Hotel and Estate were purchased by James Henry Hubbard, born in Toronto, Canada in 1847, and one of 9 children of mixed-race descent from a family of refugee American slaves that arrived in Canada in 1840. James's elder brother, William, became a Toronto alderman, one of the first politicians of African descent in Canada. James himself became a successful businessman. He was involved with catering and also marketed William's invention of the Hubbard's portable oven. James also developed an interest in game hunting and taxidermy, though he described himself as a naturalist. This led him to come to Britain, where his taxidermy specimens were displayed in exhibitions, and later the Horniman Museum in London, with a huge walrus being the most notable specimen. And this is a picture of James and some of his taxidermy specimens, which was in the Illustrated London News of 1886. Attending the exhibitions, this led him to come to Britain, where he began to organise exhibitions himself, some of which featured a new amusement ride from America called Switchback Railway, which was really the world's first roller coaster. Following his acquisition of the Dyke Estate, which he renamed Dyke Parke, he transformed it into a place of amusement and novelty and one of the biggest tourist attractions in the Brighton area. This is a poster of James's Dyke Parke Estate with all the attractions, the devil prominent. He added quite a lot of attractions to the Dyke, really turning it into an amusement complex. So there's the entrance to the Dyke Estate when James was there, and showing the switchback railway. Okay, so other attractions he added were a camera obscura. I don't know if one of those is. You go inside the lens, you can have a wonderful view of all round. Brass bands, fine dining in the hotel, a fun fair, including a carousel and swing boats, a mock-up of a 110-ton naval gun overlooking the Weald, which he got from one of the exhibitions that he attended. There we are. There was also a skull of a Greenland whale weighing 7 tons, and the aerial cableway across the gorge in 1894, which was one of the first passenger cableways in the world. You could ride across the Devils Dyke Gorge on a cable car, and that is one of the first cable cars that was ever built. Tiny little car, I think only seated about 4 people. Apparently they used to like dropping chalk down into the gorge below. It seems a bit dangerous, but if you look at some of the old photographs of the gorge, you can definitely see white chalk. And another one of his was the Steep Grade Railway, or a cliff railway, funicular railway, opened in 1897, which ran down to the village of Foynings. And another sort of type of railway that was what happened, the Dyke, was a Hotchkiss bicycle railway in 1898, which was placed at the Dyke by William George Bean, who was the founder of the world-famous Blackpool Pleasure Beach. So he had the patent to put that up there. So there you are, the bicycle railway. Used to ride round in a circle. And if you look at aerial photographs of the Dyke today, you can still see the circle. James also printed his own newspaper, the Devils Dyke Time, of which we know at least 4 issues were done. First one in 1893. Yeah, and that, actually in 1893 on Whit Monday, there were apparently 30,000 visitors to Dyke. James and his second wife, Jenny, moved into a house in Dyke Road, Brighton, which is still there, number 75, which is now a dentist. And his new venture proved to be an immediate success, with James claiming that there were 30,000 visitors to the Dyke on Whit Monday, 1893. The 1890s were the boom years for James, and he decided to lease the famous Swiss Gardens at Shoreham by Sea in partnership with another man. The pub is still there. It's called Swiss Cottage. That's it, yeah. But the gardens were long past their heyday and proved to be a financial disaster. By the end of the 1890s, things had also started to go sour for James at the Dyke too. He was often at odds with the local councils and gypsy fortune tellers he hired. Mm-hmm. He's always going to court about them. And he just kept falling out in arguments and such. And on several occasions ended up in court. The aerial and steep grade railways proved not to be a financial success, and doubts were expressed over the safety, particularly the steep grade railway. By 1900, James had largely left the running of the estate to his daughter Mildred, one of his 5 children, and her husband, and he was in financial difficulties. In February 1904, he was declared bankrupt and left the Dyke to return to Canada. He resettled in the Toronto area and may have married for a 3rd time. He died on the 27th of April, 1935. Mildred and James's granddaughter Ida are known to have stayed in Britain, with relatives of the latter living in the Sussex area until fairly recently, I believe. So it's fair to say that the Devil's Dyke was never quite the same again after James's departure. His years there were the golden age. The steep grade railway closed in 1908 and the aerial cableway in 1909, and the amusements are all cleared away, yet remains of them can still be seen to this day. So going back to the book I'd done, which was published early last year, I just did 100 copies of it. It's not just about James. James is a big part of it because his years were the most interesting, but it also features some of the other owners of the Dyke, like Thacker, who was there 50 years, and the Parke in the 30s, who also tried to bring back a bit of the golden age, but so they're also in it. It was only really sold on eBay and in a collector shop in Brighton, Step Back in Time in Queen's Road, so it wasn't really available widely. And once 100 copies had gone, I thought, well, that's the end of the story. I was quite a little bit disappointed that my I thought, quite groundbreaking research on James Hubbard hadn't really sort of garnered any interest, really. But that is until dear Sheila in Poynings.
Yes, Sheila Marshall.
She got in touch with me and said, "Oh, your research is groundbreaking. What do you know?" And that's why I'm here today, really.